Hey, everybody. We are kicking off our panel on refugees, which, of course, is a deep and global concern with lots of different sort of categories of different refugees around the world for different reasons, from war to climate change itself, causing people to need to migrate, and different ways that different communities handle the incoming refugees. Obviously, Western Europe has handled it very differently than the US, and there are different things happening in Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia. But regardless of the reason, and regardless of sort of the local constraints from a political and legislative perspective, it remains true that refugees everywhere need help. And that's what this panel today is all about. We have a few more panelists who will be joining us over time. And each of the three who will ultimately be here bring different tools and solutions to various aspects of that problem. So while we're waiting for the others, this will just be the Arjun show for a minute. And Arjun, why don't you tell us what you're doing and how you can help the refugees of the world and how our audience can support you and help you.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for organizing this. Somehow, late 2025, it's hard to find spaces that discuss one of the biggest problems that our civilization, our collective global civilization faces. And it's really nice here to be talking about it, discussing it in quite a lot of detail. Um, so, a little bit about me. I'm from India, and I currently live in the United Kingdom. And before living in the UK, I was in Germany. I'm still working between Berlin and London, and that's where our startup is based. And before I came to Oxford, I was a fellow of the German Chancellor and involved with the German government. And one of my key roles with the German government and the Chancellor's office was to go into different refugee camps and shelters across Germany and see what the gaps are in these spaces and why refugees are unable to integrate within the German systems and German society. And what I saw in my 2 years of work at the grassroots level in the middle of nowhere in countryside Germany was, in a lot of ways, one could describe as inhumane and a prison system for people who are trying to find refuge. Um, I was fortunate enough to interview several hundreds of refugees and go through their individual experiences of perhaps leaving war-torn areas or going to a separate country where they could express their identity politically, socially, and then getting stuck in this purgatory where they're in a prison-like system where they get frozen food to eat, no education, no access to healthcare. And on the other hand, in the recent times, they've been getting political backlash as well. And this is where, for me, the journey started to bring in my policy and technology expertise that I brought in from India and to build a product for them to use so that streamlining of services between refugees as a variable and the government, public services, and the private sector could happen and they could integrate faster. Yeah.
So I would think that aspect of integration, the streamlining of public services, would be radically different from country to country, maybe even within different states within a given country. I don't know if it's the same in Bavaria as it is in, like Cologne or Frankfurt or wherever. Uh, how does your startup solve this problem? Like, how do you actually plug into the different operations around the world?
I think it took us a lot of iteration to understand how complex not only public systems across Germany are, but also across Europe. For instance, before like I go into how different Bavaria could be, let's say, to Brandenburg, um, even countries are at the macro level very different, right? In Germany's when they were allowed to come in, they were put into these homes that were supposed to be temporary shelters and they were supposed to move into society after that, right? In the UK, on the other hand, there are no homes. Refugees are put into hotel spaces, which cost a lot to the government, which sort of add on to the far right arguments. And they also are put into spaces which are which has less options of mobility and accessing public services than even the refugee homes does. Now, when you compare it to the UK, you feel like German system is slightly better. But when you look within the German system, a refugee shelter that is in the middle of nowhere in Brandenburg has given no choice to the refugee who cannot navigate through German spaces, which requires an adeptness of the German language, to go to a public office and figure out basic bureaucracy that they would need to have basic paperwork, basic identity, basic rights to able
Mhm.
to integrate within the economy, within the society, within the culture. And that gap is massive. So for us, in like several months and over a year of iteration since we started trying to build a product for them, the biggest problem was where to start and how can
Mhm.
we create a product for an end user that cannot pay us, but we have to give
Right.
them value, right? So from the business point of view, from the value creation point of view, it was quite complex, and we figured out that the bare minimum that we can give them within the resources that we have and within the ideas that we have is automated form filling. So we give them an AI avatar on their mobiles because they do have mobiles.
Mhm.
Um, and they speak to the avatar in whatever language. It could be Pashto, it could be Arabic, it could be Farsi, it could be Vietnamese, it could be any language, right? And they're able to fill German forms in real time. So currently, the product that we're giving them offers them 30 plus forms, which give them access to basic healthcare, for instance, which gives them an easy ability to send their kids to kindergarten. And what it does to the social workers side of thing is that, and the government side of thing is that they get files to them which they just need to check. So we're not eliminating the human out of the loop. We're eliminating 200 hours that the human in the loop would give in to do basic things such as form filling. So we have started with that. It's a long process. I mean, integration is a very complex thing. It's not like buying a
Mhm.
product on the internet and then it being delivered through a supply chain. It's like real human sciences, that technology which
Mhm.
is not quite there. We can talk about AI as much as we want to. We are nowhere close to human compassion, human intelligence, etc. Right? So we're getting there. We're well getting to somewhere at least. So that's how
Mhm.
we're able to sort of start off with refugee shelters and refugees in the government.
So yeah, I mean, you kind of hit on an interesting point in there, which is obviously the refugees themselves cannot pay for this. So I assume it's not going to be ad based, and that the ultimate goal is to get the governments to pay for this, or what actually is the business model?
Right. So currently, how we're looking at it is that for a scalable and so I mean for us, we needed to build a scalable and sustainable model. This cannot work like an NGO if we really want to create impact and build the integration system that we're looking at. And how math would guide us is that we need to figure out a cost per user, that a revenue point per user that really helps us scale, right? So in the beginning, we identified perhaps 10 euros, which roughly translates to $11. A user would be a good amount per month as a subscription to start with. Now, where can we get this money from if we can't ask the refugees to pay us? So in Germany, how it works is that when you enter the country, you're by the police or by the system, you're put into a refugee shelter and you keep on moving into different refugee shelters. And these shelters are actually built by private companies who have gotten government contracts and tenders. And that part is done as soon as the shelter is built. They could be ex-military buildings from the World War or just ship containers that people put together. And then the government puts the contract online for other private players or NGOs to come in and get that government tender or contract for 2 to 7 years, and for which they get about 1 million to 2 million. So an entity gets 1 million or 2 million to run this system, which requires very little expenditure. And usually, if online data is available, these companies are making up to 60% profits. So what we are doing is we're going to these guys and we're giving them a B to B to C SaaS, wherein for
Mhm.
them they can track integration metrics and metrics of who's learning what languages, who's filling how many forms, and the refugees get that product on their phones or their laptops, and this way the company is basically paying us per user, and a subscription cost for, let's say, a refugee camp with 200 refugees will pay us 2,000 a month. Um, So that's how we're looking at the revenue model. With the government, we're doing the same. We're asking them to pay us directly instead of going through this whole loop. So it's a little bit, it has been a little bit of a like hard and long journey, especially from the GDPR context and getting our data privacy and data security systems in place. But we've gotten there. We are approved by the state. We are already working with Potsdam government. We have a couple of shelters. We're trying to sign on more shelters. And yeah, it's a long drawn process, but that's how our
Mm.
revenue model looks like currently.
So I think our audience, probably everybody understands that there exist refugees at some level, and many people will have an opinion about how many there are, and the opinion is probably always too many in their own country, but they may not have an understanding of how really large the scope of this problem is globally. So just to give people some examples, I mean, obviously Germany, you know quite well, but also I think you know the UK. How many people are we talking about in each of those two countries? How many refugees in Germany are there currently, and how many in the UK?
So in Germany, currently there's about 3 million refugees. And it's a little bit of a mix between Ukraine, like majority of the refugees would be from Ukraine and Syria, which have been a recent crisis in the world, right?
Mm,
So the Syrian refugee crisis started much earlier, and the Ukrainian one has been more recent. With the Ukrainian refugees, almost 100% Ukrainian refugees are a little bit more integrated in the sense that when they entered the country, um, they were given homes by the Germans to stay within the homes of the locals. It could come to the fact that they're similar in culture, or they think that they're
mm,
similar in culture, or whatever the reason might be. It's a political subject that I don't want to venture into too much.
mm,
Um, for the Syrians, for the other refugees that come from, let's say, the Middle East, Africa, East Africa, we have people who come from Vietnam and Afghanistan, for instance. They're mostly the ones that you find in the refugee shelters. And that is a number ranging from 750,000 to a million. So this is Germany
mm,
we're talking about. Now, talking about metrics in terms of demographics of Germany, Germany is in a very weird position where you have the far right increasing at a very fast pace, which is fully anti-immigration, fully anti-refugee, and Germany is a very aging old country at this point of time, and they require at
mm,
least 500,000 new workers in the economy annually to grow or to maintain the current economic levels and growth. If
mm,
they want to speed on the process, they need to go above a million. Your trains are late. They don't have workers at the airport, so flights are late. Nobody wants to do the manual labor. Nobody wants to like really work. And you have this workforce sitting there who were bus drivers in their countries. One of our guys who's also helping us with technology, he's a refugee, he still lives in a refugee camp. It's been 3 years. The guy speaks 7 languages. He's from Afghanistan. He was a software developer in Afghanistan. 2015, he migrates from Afghanistan because Taliban was after him. He goes to Ukraine. In Ukraine, he settles in Odessa, learns Ukrainian, Russian, builds a software company, quite successful. Bombs start falling, so he becomes a second-time refugee. That's the kind of bad luck we're talking about. And then he comes to Germany. He's been here 3 years, speaks much better German than I do, and the government has spent quite a lot of money on me to learn the language. And he's still stuck there. It took him 3 years to get paperwork to be able to practice his own profession. So, as a solo entrepreneur, he had 5, 6 people who came up to him to develop a software, a website. He couldn't legally do that because he needed to get
mm,
permission from the state. It took him 3 years. Hyper intelligent guy, bureaucratic processes are slow, complex, couldn't navigate through that, right? He had to go up to the mayor, barge into the door, fight with him, argue with him, and then the guy got the files moved and got approval to practice all of this. And even him with very liberal thoughts, with great education, great intellectual capacity, several languages that he knows, he thinks that everybody's against them, like it's a racist thing, or it's like, which it isn't, because like they're really slow, the German bureaucracies. So imagine how a refugee who doesn't have access to so much knowledge, doesn't have access to so
mm,
many things, would think. And then you would see that this could also go towards the internal security threat that the far right keeps talking about. But there is a reason behind that because the integration processes within the German systems are quite messed up. For the UK, the metrics are similar. Uh, they spent 700 million to try to send 100 people to Rwanda, and not even a single flight took off. So you already spent 7 million per person to send them to Rwanda, never could send them. You could give those 7 million to these guys, and they would definitely become like successful entrepreneurs. Um, so that's what we were talking. It's utter
Wait,
stupidity
wait,
at
wait.
this point.
We have to delve deeper into that story. I mean, it's not really. It's probably not germane to everything that people are interested in watching this, but I have to know how is that even possible? How do you spend 700 million and fail to fly people somewhere?
So this is the bureaucracy we're talking about. Elon Musk was talking about Doge, all of this.
Mm,
People on the left talk about bureaucracy. I mean, people across political spectrums talk about bureaucracy, right?
mhm,
These guys, the UK government, Rishi Sunak was the prime minister, and then Keir Starmer came in. They spent first 200 million to build infrastructure in Rwanda, IT 150 million, and other bureaucratic processes where they're paying, building infrastructure, hiring people, building plans, paying McKinsey's of the world a bunch of money, and just to relocate 100 people from the UK to Rwanda, who may not be from Rwanda, right? The only country that was able to do that after spending millions of dollars was Italy. So Italy has sent about 150 people to Albania, which has only 2 million people and a lot of space. They've built prison-like systems there. People are not allowed to leave the refugee spaces. It's like Orwellian surveillance within these spaces. And some people have committed suicide. Some people have claimed a lot of sexual harassment, rape, and it's really like extreme what Italy has done. And now Europe is thinking in the same direction. And it's a lot of money wasted. If you give them even a fraction of that, send them to proper classes, use some technology, they will integrate. We're all the same at the end of the day. So, I mean, it's absurd. It's really absurd.
it is in fact all absurd. I actually want to back up a little bit here because I think it's important whenever you're talking to a founder to understand, their personal story. And you just brought up that there's terrible things happening in these not even I wouldn't even call them shelters. They're almost like detention camps, whatever. Um, but I know that back in India, before you came to Europe, you were heavily involved in some anti-rape organizations. You want to talk a little bit more about your story, about where you come from and how you got from there to on the chancellor's payroll to Oxford and or actually, is it Oxford or is it Cambridge? We'll
It's
just say
Oxford,
Oxbridge, wherever you had
Oxford.
it.
Let's not say
Okay.
Cambridge. No.
Yeah. So how about that? Can you tell us a little bit about your history and how you got to here?
Yes. So I think for me, trauma has been a part of my journey. I came from a very dysfunctional family and I left my house when I was about 15. And at the same time, we had like movements across the world where you had Occupy Wall Street in the US, Arab Spring, bunch of things happening in Brazil. India also had its own moment where we had one of the largest anti-establishment movements that India has seen post-independence from the British. And I was very young and I was fortunate enough to be a part of it. And I soon became close to the leadership and we started a political party outside of that movement. And the first election we ran for in Delhi, we won. And then we suddenly found ourselves to be running a government of 30 million people. And I was given ministerial responsibilities. I was working with the Delhi Commission for Women. Before us in the commission, um, the previous minister had worked on two cases in 8 years. And growing up in Delhi, I was very well aware everybody in the world has seen stories. Delhi is a hyper masculine space, hyper patriarchal space. Even now, after perhaps this is a decade and more ago, even now, women are not safe there, and we had a mammoth task in front of us, where we were not only changing the infrastructure, bringing lights, bringing better roads, bringing water to households. We also had to fight socio-cultural norms that required women to stay inside their homes. And you would see across socioeconomic levels that women would go through rape, several different forms of crimes against them, assault, domestic violence. If a woman dating publicly was anyway very, very difficult in the space that I'm talking about. And if a girl happened to have the agency of breaking up with the guy, then there were cases where this guy would get acid and throw it on her face, and she would be in pain throughout her life, and she would lose a lot of how she looks, right? So we decided that we will build systems from the ground up where women will be able to come to us where because there have been cases where women have gone to the police stations to report crimes that have happened against them, and they have gone through statutory rape or assault in itself within the police stations because they are male dominated spaces. So we decided to create 600 different female dominated spaces. We hired NGOs and counselors who were women and set up 600 offices across this 30 million population that we're talking about so that we cover densities and encouraged women to come out and speak about what's happening to them. And by the 8 years of our tenure, we were able to work on over 180,000 crimes against women. We created the rape crisis cell. We created the help a 24/7 helpline where if you call 181, ambulance would come to you with a counselor within 30 minutes and you'll be able to report crimes. We built the legal cell so that you have legal support whenever you need to fight a case in the court. Um, we hired the first transgender person in a government space in India. We hired all these acid attack survivors who would not get jobs because of how they look within our government organization, within our ministry. And one of the most moving aspects of our whole journey within the government was when an 8-month-old baby was raped by her own uncle. We saw no choice but to go to the grassroots and start a movement and collect people to change laws. Because for that 8-month-old baby to get any forms of justice, she would spend the next 40 years going to the court because a court in Indian courts, a case lasts for 40 years, 30 years, 20 years. She would be old, perhaps going through a lot of shit over those decades just to prove that she was raped. When we came into power, there was the two-finger test that used to exist, which meant a woman needs to go to a clinic and through a man go through these cavity searches, which go against her own privacy, the right to have privacy, to prove that she was raped. We pushed the government to change laws and build fast track courts so that a case, especially case of child rape, would be finished within 6 months. And these are the things that we did across 8 months, which really shaped how I've taken all that work from India to Europe as of now, and how we used technology to solve a lot of those issues. We built GIS labs within the government. We built technological interfaces. We gave identity documents, ration documents, food documents, so that people could access food in 2015, in 2016, when technology, like even now in Germany, we don't have the kind of technology that we brought into Delhi like 10 years ago. We digitalized 40 plus public services in Delhi through the government. So that really shaped how I felt about technology and about collective action with the state and also in the private space. Yeah, yeah.
So that was incredibly moving. And to be honest, I've spent a great deal of time in India. I mean, not a great deal, a fair bit of time in India. And of course, we've all heard the stories, but you don't really feel it if you don't live there, right? Like if you show up in Bangalore or Delhi or wherever, and you spend a few weeks a year at your office and going from the hotel to the office, you don't see what the culture is like. And that's not a slant on India. That's true everywhere. The same thing happens in Germany and happens in the US. And I have to imagine, it's interesting that you bring up this question of integrating IT. And in developing countries, you often have the advantage that you can sort of leapfrog, that you can go from nothing to something that's state of the art pretty quickly. But in the older, more developed cultures where you've been on IT systems for 30, 40, 50 years, uh, just the software stacks, the hardware stacks, the actual integration into the process from a technical perspective becomes nearly insurmountable. Just the breadth of scope, the number of systems with which you need to integrate, and the lack of or difference in the APIs. How are you guys handling that aspect of things?
I think you touched on a very important point. In when you're at zero, it's easy to go to one, is what I've felt within government systems and startups. But if you're already somewhere to completely bring in a new tech stack or a new form
Mm-hmm.
of technology, go through all that regulation, especially in Europe, where it's highly regulated for the good and the bad, I think we're struggling. But like it's fun to navigate through such
Yeah.
extensive spaces and complex spaces, but it's surely very different. I think, like you said, for me, I was thinking very simplistically when I was like, oh, wait, in India we could do this, but in Germany we can't. But, like, obviously, to your point, it's because there is a change, there is a difference between the levels of development that we're talking about, right? Um, in India, you could perhaps go to the digital minister and be like, listen, I have this, can we do this? And it would be easy to surpass all regulation, privacy problems, etc., because that's how India is, right? In Germany, I've tried talking to ministers and it's not that easy. I mean, it's easy to meet them. It's easy to like meet the members of easier than in India. In India, it's more nepotistic and you have to know someone. In
Yeah,
Germany, I
yeah.
just write on LinkedIn to a minister and I get a call with them. Um, but they're generally averse of bringing in too much change to the system, right? I mean, it took them, I don't know, 80 years after World War II to even change the constitution a tad bit to take public debt for the first time. Um,
Mhm.
while the whole world, every government in the world, especially the United States and France, have like massive debts with the GDP ratio. And so, I mean, it's hard. And in the UK, it's also very complex because things are more centralized. In Germany, at least, they're more decentralized because they fear centralization of power because of historical reasons. So I could go to a municipality, which is what we're doing at the municipality level.
Mhm.
We can go there and get a project. Um, yeah, so I think it's it's in the middle of opportunity and difficulty. I wouldn't say impossibility. Opportunity being you can scale like you would scale a B2B SaaS product by going to different, let's say, law
Mhm.
firms. You can go to different municipalities and scale it, uh,
Mhm.
versus just going to one entity, which can give you centralized power, which is not what happens in Germany. But it definitely leans towards difficulty or not impossibility when because you need just a lot of money to keep going to these municipalities and energy and effort, etc. But we try.
So you actually bring up an interesting idea or angle of attack, and I realize like we kind of started this off by saying that every country is different and the systems are different and how you would integrate and what even social benefits are available. What the it's all different everywhere. But you hit on the point that it's not just the technical integration; it's the sort of the bureaucratic integration and how do you enable this sort of new project. And I wonder, it is my experience living in Central and Eastern Europe is that the bureaucracy is strongest in the ex Austro-Hungarian empires. That there is a lot of sort of continuation of those bureaucratic tendencies that were built up over those hundreds of years in Germany, in the Czech Republic, in Slovakia. And I wonder, although it would be a huge effort, if you've thought about or tried looking at like going to Spain or going to Italy and places where perhaps there's not the bureaucratic overhead that you get in Central and Central Europe.
I think you have a very interesting point because I mean, one has to have that historical lens to understand which part of Europe reacts in which way and what bureaucratic systems they perhaps have installed in their state. Um, we are, in fact, in the toughest. part of of Europe in terms of bureaucracy,
Mhm.
because Brandenburg was the center of Prussian Empire, right? Like, and the
Mhm.
Prussians are known for like a certain form of culture which is very strong men, and like we never, our army is never defeated, and that was also the epicenter of a lot of the Nazi movement and continues to be the epicenter of the AFD, RFD movement, right? And then after the war, it was DDR. It was like
Mhm.
very Soviet, and you still have those people who were the same bureaucrats pre
Mhm.
1991, running the state quite a bit in quite a lot of different municipalities, departments, and even the state level, right?
Mhm.
I think we start. One of my mentors who's been doing this for the past 10 years, who's an advisor with our startup. He's Dutch, and he's Jewish, and his parents were in Auschwitz, very close from where he works, and he shifted to Germany, and he looks at this problem from his own lens of what he's seen in his own family, and in some ways draws parallels, although it's you can't really draw parallels in different times, but he sees this being a massive problem, and he says this, that we could do this in Berlin, we could do this in North Rhine-Westphalia, which is far better,
Mhm.
but then we'll be preaching in the church instead of like
Yeah.
going to the difficult parts. But then maybe that's his mission mode that he's on, which he has this purpose. And now we're starting to realize perhaps France can be a better space to do it. Perhaps, as you
Mhm.
said, Iberia could be a better place to do it. And Brandenburg is like the Iron Fort. It's the hardest to
Yeah.
conquer, these swamps and this massive fort that you're trying to conquer. So yeah, we are in fact also looking to perhaps pivot to a more B2C model where we expand our
Mhm.
use case to migrants who've come through the education route or through the working route, um,
Mhm.
and perhaps help them and give them a one-stop solution to going through bureaucracy and automating their bureaucracy in a language that they do not speak or is not their first language. Um, these are all ideas and plans that we are charting out and perhaps moving towards a big pivot. Um, yeah, yeah, it's just, I mean, Spain is not too far away in the American context of things.
Mhm.
America is massive, but it's just culturally far away, you know?
Yep. But that's to
So
the advantage, maybe.
that's
At least I think it's worth the experiment.
It's to the advantage, but then you have to start from warm introductions, because how
Mm.
B2G and B2B works is also quite annoying, right? With the sales cycle
Yeah,
being
yeah,
quite long.
that is
And
true.
then we're looking at perhaps going to B2C and continue our
Mhm.
B2P operations and B2G operations on the side,
Mhm.
and keep applying for European grants, etc. And then go big with B2C by giving everybody a chance to use our application and actually pay for it. Working migrants can pay for it. Working refugees perhaps could also pay for it. Um, yeah, yeah. I don't have much to say on this, to be honest, because
No, it's
we're
I mean
thinking
that,
about it.
and then moving to the B2C side also is an interesting approach. It's not really a pivot necessarily, but you know, speaking as an American who lived in Europe for a long time, uh, in a country where I did not speak the language particularly well, like it's hard. But I'm very successful, very global, and I would just hire local lawyers or whatever and get stuff done. But if you're not that, if you're an IT professional, if you're not even a migrant, if you're just a professional who wants to move to a new country, there's probably a huge opportunity for this sort of thing. And maybe there's an opportunity to sort of fund the more egalitarian refugee support process out of a higher end offering for the global mobile class or something along these lines. It's definitely an interesting prospect for sure.
Yeah, we were looking at maybe perhaps having an expat version where a lot of Americans are moving to Portugal, for instance. Like you have this
Mhm.
D7 form automation or guidance.
Mhm.
Um, and other people who want to move into Europe who are high net worth individuals, and you can trickle it down a little bit if trickle down works. We don't know if it works, does it? We actually do. It doesn't. But but I mean, you know how bad luck happens, and this is like the worst time to build a product in this space. because of how the world order is shifted from a liberal world order to a more conservative
Mhm.
world order. Um, in France, the AI minister is someone France has finally an AI minister, and we were scheduling an appointment with her. She was a friend of a friend, very interested, and then the French
Mhm.
government falls down again, right? And then you don't have a stable government at all. And
Mhm.
so these are things that we are trying, but it's also like the it's just time consuming. The thing is,
Yeah.
I recently met the CFO of OpenAI, and I was discussing the government B2G model with her. OpenAI struggles in Europe as well, so
Yeah.
it's very interesting and complex, but everybody really struggles, from people like us who are small players to big tech,
Mhm.
right? Um, and then we were approached by the EUA, European Union Asylum Agency, who have now been given the responsibility to manage all the EU member states, to manage all these asylum cases, and their job is to just process the first step, which is the registration process. And they've come out with a whole policy, digital policy, where they want to use AI to automate and give the option to refugees to self-register. And there are
Mhm.
millions of people. OFPRA is the government ministry within France that does it. So there's millions of people that are stuck, who want to get their first step resolved, right, across the member states in France, etc. And they saw our product and they love it. And they told us the only other thing that we saw was a Swedish product, which is not even an avatar based voice to voice model, but something where you type in stuff. And we're very happy to take this forward. And this was back in August, no,
Okay.
September. And they said to us, June next year, you will have so many clients you won't be able to, like, you can't even imagine. And we're a startup. We're not supposed to wait for like EUA for another. I write to them, and then it's like another maybe 4 months, 5 months. So this is
Mm.
with the government. It's a little bit like, I think, how Palantir like eventually got there, and it took them like
Yeah.
what, 2 decades. So you look at it and you're like, okay, maybe we're hedging our bets with just one thing, and it might go wrong. And then you're like, yeah, what to do. So it's in that sense, the opportunity is massive. If they
Mm.
told us, we'll organize a demo day for you where we bring in all 27 EU member states and you present to them in our office, in the EUA office in Malta. And now one has to wait for another 2, 3 months for them to do that. And then you do that, and then the guys come, they like your product, and they go through their bureaucracy, and the next thing you know, it's been a year, and then you perhaps start the project, right? But when you
Yeah.
start that project, maybe a year and a half down the line, you could
Yeah.
be making a lot of revenue, right? From the government, and that contract stays. Once you are on their bill, then it's
Mhm.
great. Then there's nothing to worry about. But there's that long journey that you think is almost impossible to reach. So we're somewhere on the journey at this point.
Yeah. B2B founders think they have it hard, but the B2G is a
Oh.
totally different ballgame. Yeah. Yeah. But there's nothing to say you can't do it all. I mean, you can't do it all. You can't boil the ocean, but there's no reason the product can't be through multiple channels. And B2C to get some revenue in the short term with the long-term plan of ultimately being B2G. Well, this is definitely achievable. Um, so it appears that we are the panel. Our other two attendees have not joined us. We can continue to talk about this stuff probably forever, but uh, like let's talk a little bit more about sort of your experience, because you were obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, maybe you were. I assume you were never a refugee, but you have now lived in several countries and had to go through the immigration process and deal with these things from, well, I mean, some people might consider this pejorative, but unquestionably, I think it's true. An educated elite perspective, right? You're doing it differently than a Syrian refugee is doing it. What's your perspective on coming from India to Europe, coming from Europe to the UK? Uh, how has that impacted you? How do you think about that?
I think it's very complex. I'm still struggling with my paperwork. I am literally a digital. I don't know. I don't want to use the word refugee, because I'm not a refugee in the conventional sense of things, but I don't have paperwork in the West, right? Like, in the sense that I live on a given timeline. I always have a clock of when it might expire and I have to go back to India. I have a degree in public policy from LSE. I have a degree in international relations from Oxford. I have a scholarship from the UK government. I have experience with the government and a fellowship of the German Chancellor. But none of this actually gives me any, like, still does not give me paperwork in the West.
Mm.
I don't know what else do I need to prove to get paperwork in the West, but it just doesn't, right? So, just giving, for example, I'm in Oxford right now. I finished my degree, but I had some conferences and work and meetings that I needed to attend in Oxford, and I'm on a visitor visa that expires every six
Mm.
months, right? And I
Mm.
can stay a specific days, and I spend thousands of pounds and on getting my visas renewed. March 2026, my German residency expires, but I can extend it by doing a bunch of paperwork that nobody that I know does. And usually people give
Mm.
up or take up a job and then probably get a visa and then live in stress. Every Indian that I know or immigrant that I know who's hardworking, who's working here, has stress every single day of their life, waking up every day in the morning that they might be kicked out after spending so much time giving to the economy, to the society over here.
Mm.
I recently got married to my partner. We've been together for 5 years. We met at LSE. She's Spanish, but she's lived half her life in the UK. And I had to go back to India because of visa reasons, and we were in a long distance relationship for 4 years, and we would see each other once in 6 months. And we somehow, even yes, it's easier in the digital age, but somehow managed to survive through all these like geographical constraints, time zone constraints, and it's been really hard. Like it was a very emotional moment, and we had to actually fly to Denmark to get married. And one of the reasons we got married was because after I finished my second master's in the UK. I get like 18 months for £3,000 or something, which is a lot of money. It's like four and a half, $5,000. And I get 18 months, which don't even count up to my residency months or years that I need to ever get any indefinite leave to remain. And when I get married to her, I get like I spend £5,000, but I at least get these months counted within my time frame that I have to complete, which the government keeps changing. It's now going up to 10 years. Um, and that's not how we imagined ourselves to marry each other, but it was also 5 years, so we were always already living like a married couple, not perhaps in the same place. I would be in Berlin. I live on the flight. I live on the train. I don't know where home is right now. I've spent 5 years
Yeah.
in Europe. India definitely is home, but this is my home where I've at least placed myself in terms of social impact, in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of my academic journey. And yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons also why I'm motivated to do this is because I know how tough it is for me to navigate through all of this with exorbitant privilege, being funded
Mm.
by two separate first world governments. I still barely survive, barely survive. And yeah, I think that's the current
Yeah, I think that
situation.
I think that's an excellent summary. That really hits the nail on the head. If for people like you it is this hard, one can only imagine for a genuine refugee who may not speak the language at all, in fact, may not speak any other languages, not even close, impoverished, may not have any family, may be totally isolated in a camp, effectively. Like, it's inconceivable how they could succeed, how they could take down the next level. So I think projects like yours are definitely required, and it's just a question of figuring out the right monetization model. And it's tough to talk about that when we're here at COP. Us from the digital Davos side, clearly there's a lot of philanthropic bent towards everything we do, but we're all business people at the end of the day, and so it always comes down to we want to do good in the world, but we're not a charity. So how do we get these things to work together? How do we achieve the good outcomes in a way that's amenable to the investors that we need to take our projects to the next level? It's a big challenge.
Yes, I mean, that's what I've realized on this journey. I took off my activist, my social impact hat, because if you don't have a sustainable and scalable business, you would not be able to help people out. So we
Mm.
need to build that so that we are able to introduce these people to the economic market. And that's how one does it. I mean, and we're still finding our way, I guess. But I mean, I don't know anything about you, so I would, since it's just the two of us,
Yeah,
I would love to know more. Who are you?
yeah.
What do you
That's fair.
do?
That's fair. Yeah, so I'm Chris Richardson. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of a company called IDAP Global. We're UK based. We're a bespoke advisory and investment firm. The easiest way to think about us is if you kind of know what the neo-banking phenomenon was that was big like over the last 10, 15 years, like the Revoluts and the Wises and these sorts of guys.
Yes,
We
I
started
love
off doing that.
Revolut.
Yeah. So we're that for the investment banking world.
Wow.
So we've fully digitized the investment banking side of things, and that enables us to provide services for. We really focus on sort of small and mid-sized private enterprises in the traditional markets. So not high tech, not startup world, where if you're a mid-sized enterprise, they're the drivers of the economy, right? And the small business is something, depending on who you ask, between like 55 and 80% of the world's economy. Um, and tons of innovation happens here. But if you're a business doing 5, 10, 15 million pounds a year in revenue, and you have some amazing opportunity to really transform your industry and grow your business, how do you get funded? You can't call up the VCs because you're not a startup, you're not a potential unicorn. There's no pathway for them to their goals. You can't pick up the phone and call Goldman because they're like, you're 15 million revenue. Call me back when you're 10x that and we can talk. Right. And so what's the actual path for acceleration of the most vibrant parts of the economy? And that's what we do. So that's the short story.
Do you live in the UK?
I am currently worse than you. I'm currently globally homeless. I am. I Up until the pandemic, I lived in the Czech Republic for the previous decade, and we started this during the pandemic. And sort of since then, I've been bouncing between Prague, London, and the U.S. I'm currently in the U.S. at the moment. I haven't really decided where I'm going to put down my next set of roots, but my partners are all actually down in Brighton, and I may end up there. We'll see.
Oh wow, lovely. And how
Hmm.
long, like when did you move to Europe from the US?
2010.
Okay, and then you lived in Czech Republic and the UK, and then you kept migrating.
Yeah, and
And
kind
how
of
did you
all over. I
navigate
mean,
through all the visa issues?
my story is exactly the same as yours. I was on a continual 6 month or 1 year pipeline. I was always having to hire visa experts. I was always having to submit new paperwork. I had a company in the Czech Republic that was like I hired myself. Like I own the thing, and it's still the same, exactly the same story as you from that perspective.
It's crazy, right? The
Yeah,
bureaucracy is just, it's crazy.
yeah,
And
yeah.
Czech Republic
And 10
has,
years in, I never did get permanent residency. I'm like, well, okay, I guess they don't want me that badly, so I don't need to stay here.
and Czech Republic is also like, from what I've heard, has like corruption within the state. Um,
I mean, it does. Everywhere has corruption, right? So there are different kinds of corruption, and, I think it's changed over time. I think if you think about a bell curve, corruption in the Czech Republic is more at both ends. So you have like the people who are the sort of the oligarchs that are left over from the communist era that have some level of corruption at the highest levels of government and defense contracts and that sort of thing. And then you have like the police officer on the street who's an 18-year-old kid, and yeah, for $100 you can probably bribe them to get out of the ticket. But in the middle, it's more that Austro-Hungarian Empire stuff where it's not actually corrupt, but it is very rigid and very bureaucratic and like just hard to get through the process. But anyhow, I think we haven't reached our time limit. You and I could chat offline and meet
yeah,
each other in more depth in person.
yeah,
But I think we can let our audience leave a little bit early here. Thank you
yeah.
for this deep dive. It's been excellent. I've learned a ton. I think you're doing great work, and I wish you all the best. And we will definitely look forward to hearing from you maybe again next comp and see where you've taken this. It's exciting
Thank
stuff.
you. Thank you. Thank you. It was lovely meeting you and see you then.
Take
Bye
care.
bye. Take care.